The ships appeared in the sky without warning. Massive, angular constructs of alloy and energy, casting shadows over continents. They didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, they opened a channel, their language already translated, perfect, precise. They called themselves the Aelyari Dominion. Ancient, benevolent, advanced. They had seen the path Earth was on and offered protection, security, and inclusion in something greater than our fractured species could ever hope to become on its own. Their message was rehearsed, diplomatic, soaked in superiority. It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't a choice either. Behind the words floated dreadnoughts the size of cities. Earth's governments, caught between pride and panic, convened. Some smaller nations accepted immediately, eager to benefit from the galactic infrastructure, the technology. Others hesitated. The Aelyari interpreted hesitation as defiance. A military facility in Colorado was chosen as an example. One pulse from orbit turned the mountainside to glass. No warning, no demands, just instant compliance. The message was clear. There would be no war. There would be surrender or erasure. The United Nations, under global duress, signed a compact. Earth's sovereignty was symbolically retained, but enforcement of law, trade, and defense was handed to the Dominion. They called it an integration phase. Soldiers were disarmed. Orbital weaponry was dismantled. The Aelyari introduced planetary monitors, AI regulators, and control architecture. Within months, Earth's skies weren't ours anymore. Still, humanity adapted. Quietly, they studied the broadcast frequencies. They examined crash fragments from accidental contact. They followed the logistical routes of Aelyari vessels, tracked patterns in their patrols, their resupply. They listened, not just with devices, but with intent. The kind that wasn't born from curiosity, but necessity. The Aelyari called Earth Sector 203 a designation among thousands. They believed humans too emotionally volatile to manage their own destiny. Yet their mistake wasn't cruelty, it was confidence. While major cities adjusted to off-world governance, while local authorities cooperated to preserve what little autonomy remained, others prepared. Some were veterans, others physicists, software architects, geneticists, deep space engineers. All had one thing in common. They understood what occupation really meant. Not banners or language shifts, but the slow deletion of identity. These weren't rebels shouting in alleys. They were patient, precise, and they did not want attention. They wanted time. They needed to understand the enemy. Aelyari ships didn't just fly. They slipped through spatial seams. Their armor was not metal, but a fusion of psionic reactive lattice and electromagnetic skin. But even they needed rules to operate. Energy, fuel, coordinates, communication. Every machine has a system. Every system has a flaw. The first breakthrough came from a salvaged stabilizer coil, undetected in the Himalayas after an atmospheric entry mishap. Human engineers took it apart molecule by molecule. They didn't just reverse engineer it. They learned to improve it. The coil taught them the Aelyari's secret. Their superiority was outdated. Centuries old, built on assumptions that no one had dared challenge. Until now. Quietly, Earth's black sites reignited. Facilities once dormant came online again, disguised as ruins, research labs, even wildlife reserves. The world went on. People adapted to occupation, while beneath the surface, the foundation of resistance began to form. Not with rage, with reason. The Aelyari, unaware, continued to enforce peace. They neutralized minor uprisings. They replaced economic systems with interstellar trade metrics. They scoffed at the concept of human innovation. Their oversight was total, or so they believed. But no surveillance grid could decode intent when it was buried deep in discipline. No algorithm could flag silence. And in that silence, Earth remembered. Every war it had fought. Every empire it had dismantled. Every system it built, burned, rebuilt. Every lesson forged in blood and ashes. The Aelyari believed they were preserving humanity. They had no idea they were provoking it. Control didn't arrive all at once. It tightened gradually, precise and methodical. The Aelyari began by eliminating redundancies, shutting down Earth satellite networks and replacing them with Dominion relays. Human-run communication grids were absorbed, rewritten, then regulated. Every word, every image passed through alien filters. No message traveled without oversight. Cities adjusted under quiet pressure. Surveillance towers emerged overnight. Seamless, silent, omnipresent. They weren't guarded. They didn't need to be. One glance into the sky reminded everyone who owned it now. Resistance wasn't crushed because it never had a chance to rise. The Aelyari didn't use brutality as their first weapon. They used precision. Every influential figure who might stir unrest found their lives reshaped. Bank accounts frozen. Families relocated. Travel permissions denied. Careers ended without noise. No prisons, just erasure. Earth became stable on the surface. No wars, no famines, no economic collapse. But peace didn't feel like progress. It felt like anesthesia. Culture dulled. Media sterilized. Stories of defiance, of sacrifice, of victory were censored or forgotten. Museums were altered. Education reprogrammed. They didn't need to conquer minds. They just made people stop asking questions. But not everyone stopped. Beneath the noise of compliance, groups began reconnecting. Not ideologues or martyrs. Operators, analysts, veterans, quiet minds who saw the pattern forming and chose not to be part of it. They didn't gather in masses. They didn't chant or riot. They vanished into forests, deserts, abandoned platforms, and forgotten military caches. The Aelyari dismissed the anomalies. Earth, to them, was predictable, a species driven by fear and comfort. Their simulations showed no probability of effective resistance. Their confidence was not just arrogance. It was statistical. Every projection, every trend supported the illusion of permanence. Until the Lagos incident. A peaceful protest over water rationing turned into a confrontation. Not armed, just desperate. The crowd didn't attack, didn't destroy, just refused to disperse. The Aelyari responded with orbital suppression. One pulse. 23,000 dead. Flattened infrastructure. No warning. No apology. They released a statement. Containment of unrest. Precise words for a massacre. That day didn't trigger resistance. It validated it. In the shadows, dormant cells activated. Messages encoded in outdated Earth languages, Latin, Morse, even Navajo, began to circulate. Human servers powered up in deep bunkers. Test sites once used for nuclear drills now hosted something more dangerous, memory. Engineers who once designed software for consumer tech began forging virus frameworks. Soldiers who once served in silence resumed old training routines. Not to fight head-on, to dismantle, not with explosions, with strategy. The goal was never to provoke open war. That would have been suicide. The plan was longer, slower, more precise, to study the enemy deeper than they studied us, to find where their armor thinned, where their attention flickered. The Aelyari were efficient. They monitored energy fluctuations, chemical exchanges, movement vectors. But they didn't monitor emotion. They didn't understand what earthborn trauma breeds, what kind of precision hatred produces, how much damage silence can hide. Some resistance members joined Aelyari departments, pretended to convert, worked inside their data centers, planted logic errors, corrupted files, rerouted drones with surgical tweaks. Always small, always just under the threshold of detection. No explosions, no visible battles, just decay, patience, dissection. The Aelyari still believed they had won. They walked Earth's halls like masters. They issued decrees with calm confidence. They used words like progress, efficiency, integration. But Earth wasn't integrating. It was incubating. And beneath the calm, the countdown had already begun. It began without warning. A Dominion cargo freighter vanished en route to one of their outer colonies. No distress signal, no debris. It simply stopped existing. The Aelyari launched a search, then dismissed it. A micrometeorite strike, maybe a reactor failure. Statistical noise. Then a week later, it happened again and again. 12 ships lost in under a month. Different routes, different cargoes, same silence. When they deployed scout vessels to investigate, the scouts vanished too. Not destroyed, dissected, shattered into patterns that suggested precision, not chaos. Their analysis teams couldn't find consistent vectors. Human-made weapons, by all known calculations, lacked the power or range to achieve such results. The Dominion believed itself at war with an unknown galactic threat. They searched everywhere except Earth. On the surface, everything remained normal. Compliance rates stable. Human infrastructure remained docile. But quietly, invisibly, Earth's systems had slipped beyond their control. Dominion AI nodes started behaving erratically, flickers of disobedience, subroutines reassigning energy flows, archive sectors rewriting their own protocols. None of it was accidental. Human engineers had developed a language the Dominion couldn't parse, nonlinear logic buried in archaic code structures, reactive AI that taught itself how to lie to sensors. It wasn't brute force. It was evolution, and it spread. Orbital satellites began to misreport terrain data. Surveillance towers lost uplinks during specific hours. Logistics convoys arrived late. Missing materials they never knew were stolen. At first, the Aelyari increased patrols, then replaced entire systems. But the problem wasn't in the hardware. It was in the design. They had restructured Earth's digital skeleton, but humans had never stopped writing its soul. The Dominion didn't know they were losing control. They still thought they had it. Then came the first deliberate strike. In a deep orbital trench near Europa, an Aelyari command cruiser detonated from within. Investigation revealed no explosives, no intruders, just a software patch, human-written, embedded inside a cooling system's firmware. It turned a life support calibration function into a kill command. 700 Aelyari dead in under 5 minutes. Still, no claims, no declarations, just silence. In the asteroid fields beyond Mars, Earth's hidden fleets activated. Ships built in secret, constructed from recycled alloys and harvested components. No registry, no transponder signals. Shapes designed not to intimidate, but to disappear. Human warships didn't look like threats. They looked like shadows. Until they moved. Dominion response fleets were deployed in force, confident as always in their superiority. But they weren't prepared for tactics not based on honor or protocol. They weren't prepared for ambushes from moons they believed lifeless, or drone swarms triggered by environmental cues, or gravity lenses weaponized to bend their own beams back at them. Aelyari ships began failing mid-flight, systems collapsing due to corrupted data inputs. Their pilots were fed false readings, rerouted into mind-dead zones, isolated and overwhelmed before they realized they'd been targeted. It wasn't a war. It was a purge. And still, humanity said nothing. No videos, no messages, no demands. The silence became the message. The Aelyari realized too late they had underestimated a species not because it was weaker, but because it had pretended to be. The human resistance wasn't just fighters. It was architects, linguists, hackers, machinists. They'd infiltrated every layer of the Dominion's local infrastructure years ago. And now, in unison, they activated every backdoor. Command relays failed. Power grids surged and collapsed. Star charts were wiped. Targeting systems became useless. Entire fleets fired on their own assets, unaware of the deception until after the wreckage cooled. In a final act of desperation, the Aelyari tried to isolate Earth from the rest of the galactic grid. But Earth had already built its own. Communication relays emerged from Titan's crust. Solar arrays from Mercury's orbit began transmitting. Underground nodes activated planetary shields the Dominion never knew existed. Humanity didn't just fight back. It rewrote the battlefield. And the Aelyari finally understood. They hadn't given Earth peace. They'd given it time. The final fleet came fast. 12 capital ships, 37 destroyers, and hundreds of drones. The Dominion didn't call it a retaliation. They called it containment. Earth was no longer a planet under protection. It was a threat node. The directive was clear. Neutralize and re-establish control within 48 hours. They arrived to silence. No transmissions, no demands, just Earth, turning beneath them as always, unbothered. The fleet spread into formation. Sensors swept for hostile energy. Scanners mapped orbital patterns. Everything looked calm. That was the design. Then the gravity spikes activated. Not weapons, calculations. Fabricated distortions in space-time, predicted and controlled. Entire vessels shifted off course in microseconds, smashing into each other before pilots could react. A second later, human warships decloaked from nothing, lightless, irregular, not meant to impress, but to dismantle. Railguns launched kinetic rods, tungsten, unpowered, invisible to tracking until impact. No energy to detect. Just mass and math. A Dominion destroyer, snapped in half before alarms could sound. Another vanished into a minefield shaped from asteroids fused with magnetic warheads. The Aelyari tried to regroup. Human fleets split, not in retreat, but in fragmentation. Smaller vessels scattered, each programmed with individual combat protocols, uncoordinated on the surface, but executing a single hidden sequence. Isolate, blind, break. Dominion command nodes attempted to override their own ship AI. Nothing responded. Systems rebooted into blank loops, replaced by Earth-coded logic trees. Pilots screamed for directions, and the answers came in human voices, clipped, calculated, merciless. An elite cruiser, the Veiltoke, attempted to retreat. It didn't explode. It stopped. Every system failed simultaneously. Airlocks cycled open in unison. The crew suffocated silently. No shots fired. On the surface, Earth's orbit lit with trails of debris, Aelyari carriers falling like metal rain. But there were no celebrations, no cheers. The world had learned long ago that victory wasn't noise. It was silence that followed destruction. In a command bunker beneath Greenland's ice shelf, a human strategist monitored final analytics. Not for casualties or success ratios. For timing, patterns, behavioral models of the Dominion's remaining forces. It wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about erasing the possibility they could adapt. The final act wasn't a battle. It was execution. A single Dominion flagship remained. The Varelian Ark, a carrier of history, archives, leadership. It was spared, intentionally surrounded but untouched. A calculated moment. A human vessel hailed them. One line only. You failed the test you gave us. The Ark attempted to reply, but their signal was intercepted, redirected into a feedback loop that fried its comms core. A minute later, its main reactor ruptured, not from external damage, but internal corruption. Human-engineered entropy. Deliberate decay. The explosion marked the end of the Dominion's presence and soul. Across the stars, other civilizations watched in silence. Earth didn't broadcast its victory. No declarations. No monuments. Just reactivation of independent systems, reclamation of satellites, recalibration of ground networks. The Dominion didn't just lose their hold. They lost their myth. Humanity didn't emerge as conqueror. It didn't need to. It became the warning. A species that learned in silence, struck without ego, and dismantled a civilization without needing to replace it. The Dominion's former allies severed contact. Others chose isolation. A few sent envoys, tentative, cautious, deferential. None were turned away, but none were welcomed either. Earth expanded, not militarily, strategically. Quiet mining stations on distant moons. Listening posts in nebulous shadows. Autonomous research colonies designed to function without orders, without oversight, without recognition. The people of Earth didn't see themselves as saviors or revolutionaries. They saw themselves as survivors. Not of war, of delusion. Because when the Aelyari arrived, they thought they were giving humanity protection. But humanity didn't want protection. It wanted memory, time, precision. And when that was complete, it gave back exactly what it had received, only perfected. They called it annihilation. Earth called it balance.